compulsory. Following on from this, one of today's big news stories features Matthew Green, the man who has been giving a life-saving plastic heart. Now, uplifting as the story is, the fact remains that if he's to recover fully, he still needs a heart transplant, underlying the chronic shortage of supply in the UK of organ donors. So in the light of this, do we think that we should consider organ donation being made compulsory?
I think I heard a story, it's not something that's ever been put into practice, but I think it was a good idea at the time to make it an opt-out thing. So it's not about everybody opting in, it's about if you really don't want to do it, you opt out, which means that the rest of us who just haven't got round to it, which is a lot of us really, have automatically will be on the list.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah. Do you think anybody would want my organs?
They could go to medical research. What is this exactly?
It's quite hard. I think it's a very odd thing with a driving licence thing, but somehow it sort of suggests that,
you're meant to put on a driving licence,
if you're not trustworthy enough to give your organs, should you be allowed on the roads? I feel terrible about this because I feel I should. Yeah. I keep meaning to do it, and every time it's like giving blood. You must.
But it's not made accessible enough. I mean, why don't they just have organ donor cards everywhere you go? And I think it's because I wouldn't think, oh, I must be an organ donor, so I must ring up the organ donor helpline and do that. I remember, though, when I was probably about 12, we had a talk about it at school, and I went back to Mum saying that I think that I should be an organ donor. And Mum said that she didn't want me to be because she had this theory that they might be so desperate to save somebody's life with my heart that they would just think I was dead and get me heart out and give it to put it on the helicopter. So she wouldn't let me even think about being an organ donor because she thought they wouldn't make sure I was properly dead in their desperation.
I think they would.
They probably would.
We can put your mind at rest.
But I think that opting out part, I think that it if you don't carry the I don't want to be an organ donor card, then they just take whatever they like. I think that's the best theory.
Yeah, I think because it's kind of like complaining, isn't it? Because you're more likely to complain than you are to ring up and say something's a good idea. So if you have to, if you're like most of us and you haven't quite got round to it yet, it doesn't really occur to you, and you don't mind. But if you're really, really opposed to something, you would take the time.
I think when you have children, you realise how important it is. The thought of anything happening to.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because again, you don't. It's one of those things you don't think about. I remember we talked about it last year, I think, on here, and I went home and I absolutely, if I was in a car accident, God forbid, and they wanted to take my organ out and off, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. Hence the opting out, whatever. But Michael, my husband, was absolutely livid. He said, "Yeah, I'm not going to let other people have your organs." And I thought, well, they're not your organs to question, frankly. But you're lying there on your bed having a big family row about it. Go to have them. No, you can't have them. Very emotional. I think it's a very emotional thing.
I think it is the emotional thing that people do get tied up with, yeah. Oh, well, it's interesting. It's competition time again, and if you are